You ever notice how adults say the same line over and over, almost like it's printed on a script they read from? If you just stopped buying coffee, you'd have money. They say it with this weird confidence, like they've cracked some secret code of adulthood, as if the price of a latte is what's standing between you and financial stability. And for a long time, you probably believed it. Because it sounds logical, right? Spend less, save more. But there's a problem nobody tells you, that advice is built for a world that doesn't exist anymore. There was a time when it worked. In the 1970s, rent was cheap enough that a single part-time job could cover it. University didn't cost the same as a car. Wages actually grew with inflation, meaning when prices went up, your paycheck followed. A teenager could take a weekend job and cover textbooks, petrol, and even save a bit. So yeah, back then, maybe skipping a few small luxuries did make a difference. The game was balanced, the rules were fair, and the gap between effort and reward wasn't a canyon. But that world shifted, quietly, slowly, then all at once. Today, telling someone to fix their finances by avoiding a 3 pounds coffee is like telling a drowning person to swim harder while their hands are tied together. Rent can jump 200 pounds overnight. Groceries rise faster than wages. Energy bills double without warning. Salaries stay almost frozen while everything else explodes upward. And meanwhile, you're told the problem is, what? Buying a snack? Getting a sandwich? Existing? It's not that young people are irresponsible. It's that they're being blamed for symptoms in a system that changed while no one was watching. The advice stayed stuck in the past, but the world moved on. And that's the first red flag. Because once you realize the math doesn't add up, the bigger truth hits you. The credit trap doesn't begin when someone gets their first credit card. It starts way earlier in the stories we're taught to believe. You're told everyone has the same opportunities. You're told money works the same way it did for your parents. You're told hard work automatically equals stability. But the reality? You were born into an economy that's been stretched, rewired, and quietly redesigned, and none of the old advice fits anymore. What actually changed is the foundation. In the last 40 years, the cost of living rose faster than wages almost every single year. Housing turned from a basic human need into an investment product. Education became debt, health became debt, emergencies became debt, even groceries are bought on credit now. And the strange part is, everyone knows the system feels off, but the blame still gets pushed downward. Young people are careless. Young people don't know how to save. Young people waste money. It's easier to blame individuals than to admit the whole structure shifted. Because once you say that out loud, people start asking questions. And questions lead to uncomfortable truths, like this one. The system wasn't built to help you build wealth, it was built to keep you dependent on credit. The credit trap works best when you think you're the problem, when you feel guilty, ashamed, or confused. When you think one tiny habit is the reason you're struggling. But once you see the bigger picture, you realize something freeing and honestly a little terrifying: you didn't mess up. The game itself is different now. And nobody updated the rulebook. This is where the story really begins. Not with a coffee, but with the moment you stop blaming yourself for a system designed long before you ever stepped into it. There was a time when people only bought what they could pay for. Cash in hand, money in the drawer, savings in a little envelope tucked away somewhere safe. That was the rhythm of life, slow, steady, grounded. But the moment credit entered the picture, the entire beat of the economy changed, and most people didn't realize how big the shift truly was. It started quietly in the 1920s, when department stores began offering something new: store credit. Instead of saving for months to buy a radio or a fridge, you could take it home now and pay later. It felt modern, freeing, almost magical. Then the 1950s came, and with it the first plastic cards, Diners Club, American Express, symbols of convenience that promised to make life easier. By the time Visa and MasterCard took over in the 70s and 80s, credit wasn't a luxury anymore. It was the norm. But here's where things changed in a way nobody expected. Credit didn't just replace cash. It rewired how the whole system worked. When people started paying with borrowed money, businesses started depending on borrowed money too. Spending went up, prices went up, and suddenly the economy needed people to keep swiping just to stay alive. Debt became the engine, not the backup plan. At first, borrowing felt like a choice, a small boost to make life smoother. But slowly, as costs outpaced wages and saving fell out of reach, borrowing stopped feeling optional. It became the only way to keep up. The culture shifted from save first to pay later, and whole generations grew up thinking this was normal. You don't reveal the full scale yet, but you hint at it. Every swipe, every loan, every balance carried forward became part of a growing weight sitting on households across the country. A weight that didn't appear overnight, it built itself quietly, one borrowed dollar at a time, until the entire economy was standing on credit instead of cash. You might have thought that borrowing a little here, a loan for college there, those were choices you made. But then the moment came. Suddenly, the borrowed bits added up into something neither you nor many others could control. As of the third quarter of 2025, total US household debt, yes, every last car loan, credit card balance, mortgage, student loan pile jumped to around $18.59 trillion. At least that's what the Federal Reserve Bank of New York shows. You know someone who pays their bills on time, isn't flashy, avoids bad spending? They're still caught in it. Because this isn't about being reckless anymore. It's about living in a system where simply keeping pace makes you vulnerable. The shift from cash to credit meant borrowing became normal. But now it's not just normal, it's necessary. Rent rises, tuition rises, insurance bills, medical bills, credit cards become backup even for people who thought they'd never need them. And that's where the trap closed. When the cost of living outgrew the paycheck, borrowing was no longer optional. It was survival. And once you're using debt to live, escaping becomes incredibly hard. It's not about skipping a latte anymore. It's about the rent increase, the unexpected car repair, the surge in bills. The economy changed the rules, and you weren't updated. The weight of all that debt means the blame you face for being bad with money isn't fair. You were playing by the old rules, while the new game was stacked. The system rewired income, costs, credit, and you're in the trap whether you like it or not. The credit system became the foundation. And now, paying off one card, skipping one coffee, isn't enough to push a mountain that keeps growing. So this is when the story stops being individual failure and starts being structural reality. The game changed. The rulebook didn't. And you're not just behind because you didn't save enough, you're behind because the game was changed before you even hit the starting line. There's a part of the credit trap most people never see. The part that doesn't shout, doesn't panic, doesn't warn you. It just waits, quietly, patiently. Because the most dangerous part of modern debt isn't the spending, it's the interest. Credit cards weren't designed to help you borrow. They were designed to keep you paying. And the moment you make that first swipe, the machine wakes up. The minimum payment looks friendly, tiny, manageable, harmless. But that number is one of the smartest psychological tricks ever invented. It's not there to help you clear your balance. It's there to make sure you don't, because when you pay the minimum, the bank earns the maximum. Interest compounds, meaning yesterday's debt grows a little today, and tomorrow, and the next day. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't pause. It doesn't care if you're tired, stressed, or doing your best. A $1,000 balance can quietly turn into $1,500, then $2,000 without you ever buying anything new. That's the trap. You're paying for the past while trying to survive the present. And late fees, they're not accidents, they're features. One slip, one tough month, one unexpected bill, and the cost of being human becomes another revenue line on a bank's spreadsheet. For them, your struggle is profitable. Your stress is profitable. Your delay is profitable. The longer you stay in debt, the more they earn. Banks don't want you to drown, not completely. They want you afloat just enough to keep paying, not sinking, not escaping, drifting. Because as long as you owe, they grow. This is where the truth hits. In a savings-based world, banks made money when you succeeded. In a credit-based world, they make money when you don't. Your debt isn't a mistake to them. It's an asset. And that's the moment you realize the interest machine isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. There's something eerie about how much of your life is decided by a number you didn't choose, can't see changing in real time, and barely understand when you're young. The credit score, invented in 1989, long before most people today were even born, now sits in the middle of everything. It decides if you can rent a flat, get a phone contract, buy a car, or even land certain jobs. One number built from your past, shaping your entire future. And the wild part? It's not actually measuring trust. It's measuring how well you fit into a system built on borrowing. The credit score doesn't reward the person who saves. It rewards the person who borrows and pays just enough to keep the machine fed. Miss one payment because life slapped you out of nowhere, a medical bill, a broken tire, a shift cut, and that mistake can follow you for 7 years. 7 years for a moment where you didn't have enough. 7 years for being human. That's not trust, that's control. Before credit scores, banks judged people individually. They looked at income, character, history. But once the score arrived, the humanity disappeared. You became a data point, one that could be punished instantly and forgiven slowly. Landlords use it. Insurance companies use it. Employers use it. Your entire life is filtered through a system designed to keep you borrowing, because borrowing is the only way to build the number that the system demands. It's a cage disguised as a rating. You're told to protect it at all costs, like it's your reputation. But the truth is darker. The score doesn't care who you are. It cares how profitable you are. Pay everything on time for years and it rises slowly. Slip once and it drops instantly. That's not fairness, that's leverage. A world where your worth is reduced to a number isn't a world built for people. It's a world built for lenders. And once you see that, you realize the credit score doesn't free you. It keeps you exactly where the system wants you. Dependent, predictable, and always paying. There was a time when education was the great equalizer, the ladder anyone could climb to build a better life. Your parents and grandparents still talk about it that way. Go to university, get a degree, and you'll be fine. But somewhere along the way, that ladder was quietly rebuilt into something else. A long-term subscription that follows you through your entire adult life. Student loans didn't start as a trap. They began as a promise. In the 1960s and 70s, governments and banks worked together to make college more accessible. But as tuition rose faster than wages, something shifted. Instead of helping students, loans became the product. And students, they became customers, perfectly predictable, locked in for decades, and unable to walk away. That's what makes student debt so profitable. You can't escape it with bankruptcy. You can't pause it when life hits hard. Interest grows even while you're unemployed, sick, or struggling. A degree that once cost the price of a used car now costs more than houses once did, and every year you spend just trying to catch up, the interest quietly builds a second life of its own. People assume student loans are just another bill, but they're not. They're a contract that stretches deep into the future. You borrow at 18, before you've worked a real job, before you know what salary feels like, before you understand how long 10 years actually is. And by the time you realize the weight of it, the interest has already become a shadow you're carrying. Education turned from opportunity into obligation. Not a path to success, but a commitment you're expected to accept if you want any chance at stability. The system doesn't just want you to learn, it wants you to owe. Because a student borrower is predictable. They pay for decades. They almost never default. They almost never disappear. It's the perfect customer, not because they're wealthy, but because they're trapped. And once you see that, university stops looking like a doorway and starts looking like the entrance to another layer of the credit trap. When you zoom out far enough, something surprising and honestly a bit scary becomes clear. Even entire countries are stuck in the same trap individuals fall into. We grow up thinking nations are powerful, rich, unstoppable forces. But behind the flags, speeches, and headlines, most countries borrow money for the same reason people do. Not to get ahead, but just to survive another year. It works like this. A country hits a crisis, inflation spikes, food prices jump, fuel costs rise, currencies weaken. Instead of fixing the root problem, governments turn to giant financial institutions like the IMF or the World Bank. These groups offer loans the same way a credit card company does. Fast, helpful on the surface, but loaded with terms that pull you deeper in. The first loan leads to the next, then the next. Soon, nations aren't paying off their debt, they're just paying the interest. It's refinancing on a massive global scale. And just like individuals, once a country is in, getting out becomes nearly impossible. If they try to break free, their currency drops, foreign investors panic, and their economy gets punished. The web holds tight. Look at history. Argentina has defaulted multiple times. Greece spent a decade trapped under crushing repayments. Dozens of African and Asian nations are stuck juggling loans just to keep the lights on and the shelves stocked. These countries aren't irresponsible. They're working inside a global system designed to keep money flowing upward, not outward. So when someone tells you that debt is a personal failure, remember this. If whole nations can't escape it, how is a single person supposed to? Debt isn't a mistake anymore. It's the operating system of the modern world, a network built so everyone, from students to families to governments, stays plugged into a cycle of borrowing just to keep moving. Once you see that the trap is global, the shame disappears. You realize it was never just you, it was the system all along. The truth is, you can't tear down the whole system. You can't wake up tomorrow and rewrite how banks work, how governments borrow, or how the cost of living got so far ahead of the paycheck. The credit trap is too old, too big, too woven into how the world runs. But once you see it clearly, once you understand its architecture, something powerful happens. You stop blaming yourself for things you were never meant to control. That's the real freedom. Most people move through life feeling ashamed of their money struggles, convinced they're the only ones falling behind. But you've seen the bigger picture now. You've seen that debt isn't a sign of failure, it's evidence of a system designed to keep everyone, from students to workers to nations, borrowing just to stand still. When you understand that, you stop falling for the myths. You stop letting guilt guide your decisions. You start thinking like someone who knows the rules, even if you didn't choose the game. And that shift matters. Because once you stop carrying the weight of false responsibility, you can actually move smarter. You make choices not out of fear, but out of clarity. You recognize the traps, the minimum payments, the predatory loans, the deals that aren't deals at all. You learn when to say no. You learn when to walk away. You learn how to manage money in a world that makes that as hard as possible. Knowledge won't erase debt overnight. It won't magically fix the cost of living. But it does something more important. It protects your story. It keeps the system from deciding who you are or what you're worth. It gives you back the one thing the credit trap tries hardest to take control over: your own narrative. You might not escape the trap completely, but you can learn to live inside it without letting it own you. And in a world like this, that's a kind of victory too.